I brought homemade preserves to my in-laws as a surprise and froze when I saw my husband kissing another woman on the porch, a boy calling him Papa. That moment split something inside me. It was a sunny October morning in Oslo. The air was brisk, clean, almost too perfect. I could smell the cinnamon from the apple pies cooling on the counter. I had packed them along with 2 jars of pickled carrots and a container of fish stew. Mikkel's parents always loved my cooking. He had been going to visit them every Sunday without fail. I admired that about him, his loyalty, his sense of responsibility. So that morning I thought, why not take the trip myself? Give him a break. Surprise them with the food. Maybe even hear some funny village gossip in person. I didn't tell anyone. I just slipped on my warm jacket, wrapped a scarf around my neck, and loaded the basket into our old car. The ride out of the city was beautiful, golden leaves fluttering past the windshield, the smell of pine from the roadside forests. For a moment, everything felt light. But when I arrived at the cottage and stepped out of the car, the sound of a child's laughter stopped me cold. On the porch stood Mikkel, smiling at a woman I didn't know while a little boy clung to his leg, calling him Papa. Have you ever had your heart ripped out by a single sound? If you were me, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And stay with me because what I found next would change everything. We lived in a quiet apartment overlooking the edge of Oslo. Our windows framed the fjord in winter and the golden treetops in fall. It was the kind of place that made you feel safe, tidy, predictable. That was how I liked things, predictable. Bookshelves lined our living room, alphabetized and curated with literary classics. The scent of old paper-steeped tea and my grandmother's almond soap always lingered faintly in the air. On the small side table, a vase of dried lavender I arranged every Sunday after our market strolls. Mikkel used to say I made life feel like a well-written sentence, thoughtful, composed with just enough mystery to turn the page. He, on the other hand, lived in numbers, an engineer through and through, measured, focused, unshakable. While I analyzed subtext in Chekhov, he solved bridge stress simulations. While I traced character arcs, he aligned cross-sections and load paths. But somehow, it worked. We had our rhythms. Every Friday, he'd bring home cinnamon rolls from the cafe near his office. Every Sunday morning, he'd grind the coffee beans by hand. He said it helped him think. I loved waking up to that sound. I'd pretend to still be asleep until I felt the bed shift with the weight of his return. A warm mug pressed gently into my hand. Sleep well, he'd ask. Only if you read me something, I'd reply. He always did. Poetry mostly. Neruda. Hauge. Sometimes Rilke when he was feeling grand. He read them in a low, careful voice, almost reverent. And even though I knew he didn't care much for metaphors, he read them because he knew I did. That's how I measured love. In small things. In being seen. Every week, Mikkel drove out to the village where his parents lived. Birkelund Cottage, a wooden house tucked beside a silver birch grove. He said the garden there kept him sane, that every man needed soil between his fingers to remember he was real. At first I joined him. I brought jars of berry preserves, pickled herring, cloudberry compote. His mother called me Flink Pike, her clever girl. We would sit in the garden drinking rosehip tea while Mikkel fixed the fence or replaced the window panes. But over time, I stopped going. University commitments piled up, and Mikkel said it was fine, easier even. I could focus on my classes and writing while he handled the chores. It became routine. I'd pack food into his canvas tote on Sunday mornings, roast vegetables, salmon rolls, my pickles. He'd kiss my forehead, tell me he'd be back before dinner. I'd wave from the window and return to my books, our cat asleep across my lap. He never gave me a reason to doubt him, but lately, something had shifted. He still brought the coffee, still read poetry, still ran his thumb along my jawline when I was deep in thought. But his eyes wandered more out the window into silence. Sometimes I caught him staring at his phone a moment too long. Once I asked what he was reading. He said a text from work and turned the screen away. His voice was the same, but the way he held his breath wasn't. Then there were the absences. He stayed longer in the village, saying his father needed help rewiring the tool shed, or that the car wouldn't start. Logical excuses. Reasonable. Still, the silences between us felt like walls with no doors. I chalked it up to stress. He'd been promoted. The new bridge project was massive, and deadlines had him stretched thin. I didn't want to become that kind of wife, the suspicious one. The one who checks messages or keeps mental tallies. That wasn't me, but the ache began to build. Quiet, slow. And on that particular Saturday morning, I woke up with a sharp sense of longing. Not suspicion, just longing. I wanted to breathe the air outside the city. I wanted to see the birches turn gold. I wanted to hear his parents laugh again over fresh pastries. More than anything, I wanted to feel close to him again. So I rose early. The light hadn't even shifted fully through the blinds. I walked barefoot into the kitchen, the tiles cool beneath my soles. I opened the fridge, scanning the shelves. Pickled carrots, fish stew. 3 perfect apple pies wrapped in wax paper. I took them all. I packed slowly, wrapping each jar in a towel. The air outside was sharp, and frost kissed the edge of the windows. I dressed in layers, thick socks, soft jeans, wool sweater, scarf. As I locked the apartment, I remember whispering to myself, "He'll be so surprised." And I meant it, because in all the miles I imagined crossing that day, not once did I imagine I'd end up staring into a life I never knew existed. I should have noticed it sooner, but love has a way of dressing wounds in lace. It wraps silence in softness, makes shadows look like rest. At first it was little things. His phone, for instance. Mikkel had never been secretive with it. He used to leave it everywhere, on the kitchen counter, on the bedside table, charging on the windowsill. I used to tease him for missing texts because he left the ringer off. But now it was always with him. In his pocket, in his hand, face down on the table. The first time I really noticed was 2 months ago. We were eating dinner, leek soup, sourdough bread still warm from the oven. His phone buzzed once, then twice. I looked at him. He didn't flinch, didn't reach for it. That was odd. Mikkel always checked for work messages. I asked casually. Important. He hesitated just a breath too long, then shook his head. No. Just a client reminder. Nothing urgent. But he didn't look at me when he said it. His spoon clinked too quickly against the bowl. It was such a small thing, but it rang in my chest like a distant bell. Another time he came home from Birkelund with a sweater I didn't recognize. Worn and soft, but unfamiliar. When I asked about it, he said his mother had given it to him, said it had been his father's. Something about the way he avoided eye contact felt, not like a lie, but not truth either. Like a half-truth carefully folded. He didn't withdraw from me completely. No, he still held my hand while watching films. Still kissed my cheek while I graded papers on the couch. But his eyes carried a weight. He moved slower, spoke softer, smiled less. One night I found him in the hallway, standing by the window. Just standing there, arms crossed, staring into the dark. I walked up behind him and wrapped my arms around his waist. What are you thinking about? He rested his hand over mine and said, Nothing really. Just time. Time. What did that even mean? I miss the way we used to talk, I whispered. He turned and kissed my forehead. So do I. That was all. And it should have been enough, but it wasn't. Because something had shifted. Not with a bang, but like a quiet hinge turning in the dark. A door opening to another world I wasn't allowed to see. So that Saturday morning, when I woke with the strange urge to go to Birkelund myself, it didn't feel like suspicion. It felt like reaching. Like extending my hand back into a connection that had grown too quiet. I told myself it was a surprise visit, a gift. But somewhere beneath that, something in me needed to see. The drive started out simple, peaceful. I packed everything into the trunk. I wore Mikkel's old scarf, the one with the soft gray stripes he used to drape around my neck when we walked along the fjord. I turned on the radio, humming to a tune I barely remembered. The sun cut low across the hills, painting the fields in soft amber. I even thought of stopping to pick some wild mushrooms by the roadside. Everything outside was calm. Inside, though, my thoughts scattered. I tried to remember the last time Mikkel and I had made love. The last time he really looked at me, not just with kindness, but with hunger. I thought of the books I had loaned him, novels I wanted him to read so we could talk about them. They still sat untouched on his nightstand. I thought of the way he kissed me lately, light, brief. A kiss you give a friend, a cohabitant. Not a lover, and yet he was still caring, still gentle, still mine. Wasn't he? The question gnawed at me. And I hated it. I hated that it existed, that it had grown from a seed into something with roots. I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter as I turned off the highway. The road narrowed into a familiar dirt path flanked by birch trees, already losing their leaves. I saw the old wooden sign, Birkelund, still slightly crooked. A crow flew across the sky. A wind picked up and scattered yellow leaves across the hood of the car. I remember thinking, this will be good. They'll be happy. Mikkel will be surprised, maybe even laugh. Maybe this will be the day we reconnect. I parked behind the hydrangea bushes. The cottage stood ahead just as I remembered it. Whitewashed panels, green shutters, flower boxes under the windows. I stepped out. And then, I heard it. A child's laugh. High, pure, familiar. And then his voice. Mikkel's voice. Soft, warm, saying something I couldn't make out. I froze. The basket of food still in my arms. The air no longer crisp but heavy. And when I rounded the hedge and saw what I saw, I forgot how to breathe. There he was. Standing on the porch of Birkelund Cottage, the sun hit him at an angle that should have made me smile. Warm golden soft along the curve of his neck. His hair was slightly messy. He always ran his fingers through it when nervous or distracted. His posture relaxed, shoulders unburdened. For a moment he looked younger, lighter. Almost happy, but not because of me. Because of her. A woman stood beside him close enough that their arms nearly brushed. She was holding a small child, a boy no older than 5. Her hand rested on the boy's back, gentle, instinctive, like a mother's touch. Mikkel was speaking to her, his face animated. He was laughing, laughing. And she smiled back, soft and slow. Not the kind of smile you give a neighbor. Not polite, not distant, familiar, safe, intimate. I felt the weight of the basket in my hands suddenly triple. My fingers went numb. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared. Then the boy looked up at Mikkel and called out, "Papa!" My knees nearly buckled. I took a step back. The woman set the boy down, and he immediately ran toward Mikkel, arms open. Mikkel crouched, opened his arms wide, and swept him into a hug. He whispered something into the boy's ear and ruffled his hair. His smile in that moment, open, joyful, completely unguarded, was one I hadn't seen in years, maybe ever. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that he was here living a life I never knew existed, or the fact that he looked more at home in this life than he ever did with me. My breath hitched. The corners of my vision darkened. I couldn't think, couldn't act. The only thing I could do was feel everything at once. Betrayal, confusion, anger, grief. All of it knotted in my chest, choking me. I tried to say his name. Nothing came out. Mikkel turned toward the garden gate, the same path I was standing near, but he didn't see me. He was too caught up in their world, in her, in the boy, in everything I wasn't. I took another step back, crunching a twig beneath my shoe. He looked up. Our eyes met, only for a second, but it was enough. His smile faltered. His mouth parted slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but no words came. Neither of us moved. Neither of us blinked. And then I turned. I walked back to the car with shaking hands and burning eyes. The basket hit the passenger seat with a dull thud. I fumbled with the keys, finally jamming them into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I threw it into reverse tires, grinding over gravel. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to leave. The road blurred as tears spilled down my cheeks. The scent of apples and cinnamon from the pies now made me nauseous. I rolled the window down, hoping the wind would clear my head. It didn't. I kept driving past the fields, past the birches, past every piece of the story I thought was mine. Thoughts screamed in my head. How long? Who is she? What about me? What about our home, our bed, our plans, our poems? How do you live with someone for years and not know they belong to another life? I remembered Mikkel fixing the shelves in our apartment 2 weeks ago. I had kissed his temple, thanked him. He said, "Always for you," and smiled. That same smile I saw him give the child. That same warmth, that same lie. By the time I reached the edge of the forest road, I had to pull over. I couldn't see through the tears. My body shook. My stomach twisted. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and let it all fall out, every sob, every broken breath. He was living 2 lives, and I was in neither of them completely. That day, something inside me snapped. Not loud, not violent, just quiet. Like a string pulled too tight for too long, finally giving way. And I knew no matter what happened next, there would be no going back. I could have stormed back that same day, slammed the car door, walked right up to Mikkel and demanded answers, screamed, cried, made a scene. Maybe I would have felt better, at least for a moment. But something in me refused to hand over that kind of power. I wouldn't let the woman on the porch or the child calling Papa see me broken. I wanted clarity, not drama. I needed to understand, so I waited 3 days. 3 long, sleepless, silent days. Mikkel noticed my distance. Of course he did. But I didn't say anything, and neither did he. I couldn't look at him without seeing that other world, that other smile. On the 3rd day, I told him I had errands in the city and left early, but instead of heading downtown, I drove back to Birkeland. This time, I had a plan. I parked farther away, brushed the tears from my eyes, and adjusted my coat. I didn't wear anything flashy, just jeans, a cream sweater, and Mikkel's scarf, the one he had once said made me look like home. I walked up the gravel path with slow, steady steps. My heart thundered so loudly I was afraid it might echo down the quiet lane. She was outside again, Sina, kneeling in the garden planting something near the fence. Her hair was tied back loosely, a streak of dirt on her cheek. She didn't look up until I spoke. "Excuse me," I said carefully. She turned, startled but not alarmed. "I heard you have one of the oldest cottages in this village," I continued, keeping my voice neutral. "I study traditional architecture, and I was hoping to see the interior if that's not too much to ask." Sina straightened, brushing soil from her hands onto her jeans. She studied me closely. For a moment, I thought she'd seen through me. But then she nodded, eyes tired, but not unkind. "We don't get many visitors asking about the house," she said. "Come in if you'd like. I'm Sina." I gave her a fake name. "I'm Astrid," I lied. Inside, the house was simple, clean. There were toys tucked in corners, baby formula on the counter. And in the far corner of the living room, Thomas, playing quietly with a red wooden car. Sina poured tea without asking, setting 2 cups on the table. I took mine with shaking hands, forcing a smile. "I love how much light this room gets," I said. "Morning sun," she replied, watching me. "It's the only reason I stayed after Thomas was born." I nodded, unsure how to continue. "You're not here for the house," she said finally, softly. I froze. She set her cup down. "You saw us, didn't you?" I nodded. "I'm Liv," I admitted. She didn't flinch, I figured. The room went quiet except for the ticking of a small clock on the shelf. I didn't know I whispered. About any of it. About him. The boy. You. Sina folded her hands in her lap and looked at me, really looked. Not with pity, not with challenge, just understanding. "He never told you," she said. "It wasn't a question." "No." She exhaled slowly. "Then I'm sorry." I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not the villain here," she continued. "But I'm not a martyr either. We had a past. Before you, it ended. And then Thomas happened." "Did he ever leave you?" I asked. "Yes," she said, fully. "He didn't want to, but he did. For you." "Then why does he still come?" She glanced toward the child in the corner. "Because he's Thomas's father, and because he's afraid. Of losing the boy, of losing you." I felt like someone had driven a pin straight through my chest. My hands trembled around the teacup. "Do you love him?" I asked. Sina shook her head. "I did. But that was another life. We barely talk now unless it's about Thomas. He comes every Sunday, fixes the gate, changes light bulbs, reads bedtime stories." I stared at the steam rising from my cup. "And you let this continue?" She gave a bitter smile. "You think I had a choice? He never said a word about you. I found out by accident. A photo in his wallet once turned the wrong way. Why didn't you confront him?" "What good would that do?" she said quietly. "He made his decision. I didn't want to be the woman who broke your world. I figured if he kept it hidden this long, maybe you were better off not knowing." I wanted to scream. At her. At him. At myself. Instead, I asked one final question. "Is he happy?" Her pause was long. "He's tired," she said. "He wants to do right by everyone, and ends up failing all of us." We sat in silence. Thomas looked up from his car and stared at me with wide eyes. He looked so much like Mikkel, it made my heart ache. Sina stood and opened the door. "You can hate him if you want," she said. "But don't hate the boy." I stood too, barely holding myself together. "Thank you for the truth," I said. And I meant it. because even if it shattered everything, I needed to see it. Clearly, quietly, on my own terms. He was waiting when I came home, sitting on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor like a child about to be scolded. The apartment smelled like chamomile. He'd made tea my favorite. 2 mugs sat untouched on the table, steam long gone. The curtains were half closed. The lights were off save for the lamp in the corner, casting everything in golden shadow. He looked up when I stepped in. His face, so familiar yet suddenly distant, was pale and lined with guilt. "Where were you?" he asked gently. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't move closer. "I was with her," I said. He didn't ask who. He already knew. His whole body seemed to fold in on itself. "I guess I don't need to ask what she said," he murmured. "No," I replied. "But you need to explain what you didn't." He stood slowly. "Liv? Don't say my name like that," I said, barely above a whisper. "Not until you can say it with the truth." He walked toward me but stopped halfway. There was too much space between us now, more than the length of the living room. "She was someone I knew," he began, voice trembling. "Before you. It wasn't meant to continue. But then Thomas came. And I couldn't abandon him." "Did you abandon her?" I asked. He hesitated. "That's not an answer," I said. "I tried," he said, finally. "I thought I had. I thought I could be with you fully and still. Be there for him. Without telling me, I was afraid," he said. "Afraid I'd lose you. That you'd never look at me the same." He was right, I didn't. "And what was your plan?" I asked. "To live 2 lives forever. Did you think I'd never find out?" He shook his head. "I didn't have a plan. I just kept going. Week by week, Sunday by Sunday." I took a breath, steadying myself. "You lied to me every time you left." "I never lied about loving you." That made me flinch, because part of me believed him, and part of me hated that I still wanted to. We stood there both in the same room, and yet in completely different worlds. "I held that child's toy in my hand," I said. "I heard him call you Papa. And you smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world." Mikkel covered his face with both hands. "He's my son, Liv. I know, I couldn't abandon him. I couldn't." "You didn't abandon him," I said. "You abandoned me." He froze. I finally took off my coat and sat on the farthest edge of the couch. He sat across from me, not beside me, not anymore. "I don't want to scream," I said. "I don't want to break things or throw accusations. I just want to understand what parts of our life were real." He looked up at me, tears in his eyes. "All of it," he said. "Everything with you was real. Nothing with her continued after we met. But Thomas needed me, and I didn't know how to live with both truths. So you let one truth die quietly." He nodded. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Sorry," I repeated. A word that fits inside a teacup, but you poured it into a life. We sat in silence for a long time. Eventually I stood. "I need to be alone for a few days." "Are you leaving me?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "But I need to leave this space. I need to breathe somewhere that doesn't smell like betrayal." He didn't follow me to the door. He just sat there, still small, waiting. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said one last time. And yet I replied, "Here we are." I closed the door softly behind me. And for the first time in years, I stepped out of our home feeling like it didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't go far. Just a 2-hour drive north to a small cabin I hadn't visited in years. It belonged to my aunt once. Now it was mine, inherited quietly, like most forgotten things in this family. We called it Ravnos, the Ridge of Ravens. The forest wrapped around it like an old wool blanket, heavy and protective. There was no signal out there, no news, no messages, no voices but the wind and the birds. And that was exactly what I needed. The first night I didn't sleep. I lay under the worn plaid blanket, listening to the creaks in the roof and the occasional whisper of pine branches brushing against the window. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas's face, Mikkel's hands in the boy's hair, Sina's tired smile, and I heard myself saying, "You didn't abandon him, you abandoned me." In the morning, I brewed black coffee over the old iron stove. The scent reminded me of Mikkel, of our Sundays. But here it smelled different, more honest. There was no pretense in the air. I took the mug outside and sat on the stone steps, watching the mist rise between the trees. It was cold enough to see my breath. I wrapped my arms around my knees, letting silence pour into the spaces I didn't know were empty. Day by day I remembered. Not the betrayal, not the porch, but the things that came before it. The time Mikkel patched up my bookshelf without being asked. The way he always left exactly one square of chocolate beside my tea in winter. The time he stood in the pouring rain soaked to the bone because he didn't want me walking home alone after a conference. Were those lies too? No. I don't think so. I think that's what made it harder. It would be easier if he were cruel, or careless, or selfish. But he wasn't. He was kind, dutiful, cowardly. A man torn between obligation and honesty. And I was a woman torn between love and dignity. There's no guidebook for what to do when someone you love fractures your truth so quietly you almost miss the sound. On the third night, I found myself flipping through an old notebook I'd brought. It had quotes I used to collect, lines from novels, bits of poems, overheard conversations from cafes. One page had something I'd underlined twice. Some truths don't shatter. They settle, like dust. You live with them, not above them. I stared at that line for a long time. By the fourth day, the pain in my chest had dulled. It didn't vanish, it just softened, like a bruise turning yellow at the edges. I walked the trails behind the cabin, sat by the frozen creek, watched the light filter through pine needles like cathedral glass. I didn't think of what I would say to Mikkel. I didn't rehearse speeches or draw up ultimatums. I didn't even cry anymore. I just breathed. And somewhere between the frost and the birch trees, I found something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity, not forgiveness, not yet. But clarity. I couldn't change what he had done. I couldn't unsee the child or unhear the laughter, but I could choose what came next. And that was power. So on the sixth day, I packed my things, folded the blanket, washed the mugs, locked the door to Ravna's, and left a small note behind. You helped me listen to myself. Thank you. I drove back to Oslo in silence. When I stepped into the apartment, Mikkel was sitting exactly where I left him, on the edge of the couch, same sweater, same posture. But something in his eyes had changed. Not just guilt. Something deeper. Something like waiting. He stood uncertain. Liv? I raised a hand. I'm not here to scream, I said, or to forget. He nodded. I'm here because I needed to know that I still belong to myself. And I do. He swallowed hard. I don't know if I can ever be who you need again, I continued. But I do know this: if we keep going, it has to be honest. No more compartments. No more secret Sundays. His voice was rough. I'll do anything, I shook my head. You'll do less, actually. You'll stop trying to be two men. And choose to be one. He stepped forward slowly. I still love you, Liv. I looked at him, really looked. I know, I said. Then I added quietly, we're not okay, but we're not over. It wasn't a finish line, it was a beginning, a jagged one, uneven, but real. And for now, that was enough. The next morning I woke up with a decision, not a feeling, not an impulse. A decision. We sat across from each other at the breakfast table, silence between us, but this time not heavy, just quiet. I want to go back, I said. Mikkel looked up from his untouched coffee. Back to Birkelund, to see Sina, to see him. He blinked. Are you sure? No, I said honestly. But I think it's time. He nodded slowly, carefully, as if afraid the moment might break if he moved too fast. Then I'll drive, he said. I spent the morning baking, not out of guilt, not to impress, but because I needed to bring something of myself. Something warm, familiar. Mine. Cinnamon rye rolls, lingonberry preserves, a butter cake with cardamom and almond. Food for me had always been a kind of language. It said, I'm here. I care. I won't run. We packed in silence. As we drove through the autumn hills, I stared out the window. The trees had lost more leaves now, branches bare, sky exposed. Stripped down, honest, like us. Mikkel reached for my hand once. I let him, but I didn't squeeze back. Birkelund appeared over the ridge just before noon. Sina was in the yard again, hanging a blanket over the fence. She turned when she heard the car. This time she didn't look surprised. She smiled soft and a little tired and walked toward us. Thomas peeked out from behind the garden shed, holding a wooden airplane. This is Anna, Sina said to the boy, nodding toward me. She's Mikkel's wife. Thomas looked at me, really looked. Then after a pause he offered a shy wave. "Hi," he said. "Hi, Thomas," I replied. "I brought cake." He beamed. I handed Sina the basket. "It's nothing fancy, just something I like to bake on cold days. It smells like a childhood memory," she said, eyes kind. "Come in." Inside the house was warm. The scent of pine and something vaguely floral lingered in the corners. Mikkel took off his shoes as he always did and sat awkwardly on the edge of the couch. Sina brewed tea. Tomas played at our feet, spinning the airplane in quiet loops. He glanced at me from time to time, curious but unafraid. I watched him. His hair was darker than Mikkel's, his eyes same shape, same dimple in the cheek when he laughed. His innocence didn't ask to be understood. It just was. Sina poured the tea and handed me a cup. We didn't talk about the past, not directly. Instead, we spoke of weather school, a new bakery in the village. It was the kind of conversation three women might have at a bus stop. Only this time, the air between us hummed with unspoken truths we had all accepted. At one point, Thomas climbed onto the couch beside Mikkel. Without a word, Mikkel pulled him into his lap. He read from a picture book in Norwegian. His voice, low and steady, was the same voice he used to read poetry to me. But now it belonged to someone else, too. I didn't feel jealousy, not anymore. I felt a settling, like something had finally taken the shape it had always meant to be. Later, as we were leaving, Sina walked me to the gate. "I didn't expect you to come back," she said. "Neither did I replied. "Thank you," she added, "for seeing us as we are." I met her eyes. "This isn't easy, I know, but we're not enemies." "No," she agreed. "We're just part of the same truth now." I nodded. "Take care of him," she smiled faintly. "I already do." As we drove away, Tomas ran alongside the car for a few steps, waving. Mikkel watched him in the rearview mirror until he disappeared behind the trees. We didn't speak on the drive back, not because there was nothing to say, but because for once everything was finally being said without words. When we got home, I put the leftover cake in the fridge, washed the mugs, folded my scarf, and sat by the window with the book I didn't open. Mikkel stood behind me. "Are we okay?" he asked. I didn't turn around, but I answered. "We're real," I said. And for now that was more important. Some stories don't end with answers, they end with choices. I didn't wake up the next morning with clarity. I didn't feel whole or strong or suddenly at peace. I woke up with the same ache in my chest, but it was quieter now, more familiar, like an old bruise you no longer flinch from. Mikkel was in the kitchen making coffee. He didn't say anything, but he placed my favorite mug in front of me, the one with the faded red fox on it. I wrapped my hands around the warmth and whispered, "Thank you. Not for the coffee, for staying, for not running, for letting me stay, too." We moved through the day gently, like people learning to walk again. There were no grand declarations, no forced intimacy, just shared space, quiet kindness, little signs of effort. He offered to cook dinner. I said yes. He asked if I wanted to read before bed. I said not yet. Progress in inches. I still cried sometimes, in the shower, in the car. Once, while watching a child on the tram lean into his father's side with a sleepy yawn. But I didn't hide it anymore, and Mikkel didn't look away. One evening, a few weeks later, I found myself humming while folding laundry. It was a simple tune, one my mother used to hum when hanging linens outside. I didn't notice at first, but Mikkel did. He walked past me, then stopped. "You're humming," he said, like it was some kind of miracle. "I guess I am." He didn't say anything more, but I saw it hope flickering behind the weariness in his eyes. That night I picked up one of my old poetry books and placed it on the nightstand between us. Neruda. The first one he ever read aloud to me. It stayed there for days, unopened. Until one night he asked, "May I?" I nodded, and he read. His voice was shakier now, slower, but real. And when I closed my eyes, I didn't picture Thomas or Sina or the cottage at Birkelund. I didn't picture the porch or the laughter or the betrayal. I pictured the man sitting beside me, the man who hurt me, the man who stayed. I didn't forgive him that night, but I forgave a piece of myself, the piece that once believed love had to be perfect to be real. Because the truth is, it doesn't. Love, I've learned, is not measured by absence of pain. It's measured by what you do after the pain arrives, by whether you choose to repair what was broken, whether you find the courage to ask, "Can we still grow here among the cracks?" Not all gardens are built on untouched soil. Some of them bloom through scar tissue. We've started planting ours. One conversation at a time. One Sunday at a time. One slow, honest step at a time. We visit Birkelund together now. Not every week, but sometimes. Thomas has learned my name. He doesn't call me Mama, and he never will. But he asks if I'll sit beside him when he paints. He once handed me a flower he found in the yard and said, "This one looks like you." It was lopsided, beautiful. Sina and I don't talk about the past anymore. We talk about the weather and Thomas's school and recipes for elderflower syrup. There's a truce between us, not of obligation, but of choice. We are in our own strange way, part of the same constellation now, orbiting around one quiet little boy and the man we both knew in different seasons. And me, I'm still figuring it out. Still finding new rooms inside myself I didn't know existed. Still learning that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sounds like let's try again. Sometimes it looks like showing up tired, scared, hopeful. Sometimes it means staying. Sometimes it means leaving for a while and coming back differently. I don't know what our future holds, but I do know this. The woman who stood frozen by a garden fence, clutching a basket of food and watching her life unravel. She didn't disappear. She evolved. She chose not to let betrayal be her ending. She chose something harder. She chose to begin again. And that is its own kind of revenge. The quiet kind. The brave kind. The kind that says, you can break my heart, but you cannot define me, not now, not ever. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild yourself from a truth that shattered everything? Would you have stayed or walked away? Let me know in the comments. Your voice matters. If Liv's story moved something in you, don't forget to subscribe to Sophia's Revenge Stories for more true stories of quiet strength, bold choices, and emotional redemption every single day.